Hello, everyone. This is Mallory Flowers on behalf of Jennifer Schaus and Associates, and we are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Welcome to our Webinar Wednesday series, and thank you all for joining us. Our webinars are held every Wednesday in 2018 at 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and our speakers range from accountants to attorneys and other industry professionals. For the full schedule for the rest of the year is underneath our website under the Webinar tab. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, and our speaker's contact info is posted on the last slide. So if you have any questions, please contact the speaker directly. The recordings are also uploaded on our website underneath the Archived Webinar tab, as well as on the YouTube channel. All right, this is just a quick blurb about us. Jennifer Schaus and Associates is based in downtown Washington, D.C., and we help both product and service companies with federal contracting. Our clients are domestic and foreign, defense contractors and civilians, and our services range from market analysis support to contract vehicles, including the GSA schedule. We can also help you with proposal writing and post-award contract administration. More information about our services and upcoming events can be found on our website. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dig into today's presentation, which is how to build an effective compliance program. Today, our speaker is Antonella Colella, and you can learn more about her background on this slide here. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to you.
Okay, thanks, Mallory. Thanks for having me today. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so we're going to talk about an effective compliance program today. But before we do so, I just wanted to emphasize that this is a guideline. It's a framework for building a compliance program. Compliance programs are very unique to each organization, so this shouldn't be used as a blueprint for your organization. So why are we talking about compliance programs? Well, the FAR does mandate that large contractors establish and maintain an ethics and compliance program. And this is found in FAR 52-203.13. So it says that they're required in solicitations and contracts to have a code of business ethics and conduct where the value of the contract is over $5.5 million and the performance period is 120 days or more. Now, it does say that it's for large contractors. So what is a small business? Does that mean that you don't need a compliance program? And the answer to that is no, you do need a compliance program. Next slide. And the reason for this is that the goal of any government contractor, whether you're big or small, is that you want to be responsible. FAR 9.103 says that purchases shall be made from and contracts shall be awarded to responsible prospective contractors only. So this is a public policy statement, but it's the government's way through the FAR to uphold the public's trust in the government purchasing system. So they want to ensure that the contractors that the government deals with are ethical. Next slide. So being a small business, you're not absolved from misconduct just because you're small. So being non-compliant, which is being unethical or breaking laws, can leave you on the hook for a host of problems, which are False Claims Act violations, a breach of contract between you and the government or you and your sub, a negative performance rating on your CPAR, and violations of other federal laws as well as state laws. Next slide. So, some other kind of things that can happen if you don't have a compliance program. You can have some of your costs disallowed. If you're doing any kind of funny business with timekeeping or mischarging, you can have some delayed or non-payment from the government. And always remember that inaccurate billings is really a fraud against the government, and you could be charged with False Claims Act, False Statements Act violations, etc. And these are all things that can be alleviated if you have an ethics and compliance program in place. Next slide. So what does the FAR actually say? So FAR 52-203.13 and 14 says that 30 days after award, a contractor should have a written code of business ethics and conduct. They should make the code available to all their employees that are performing the contract, and they need to promote a culture that encourages ethical conduct and compliance. So yes, this applies to large businesses, but the safest thing to do if you're a small business is to follow this and follow what the FAR says, because it's actually giving a guideline. Next slide. You also have to provide timely written disclosure when it comes to credible evidence of an ethics violation. So this is the mandatory disclosure rule. They also want you to cooperate with an audit, an investigation, or any kind of corrective action if there is a fraud. You are to display hotline posters that relate to ethics and reporting issues. So this is really letting people know that it's okay to report ethics violations and that it should be encouraged. There's also policies and actually a poster that needs to be hung relating to the human trafficking regulations, and that applies for large contracts over $500,000. So again, this is a guideline. It's not, the FAR doesn't really detail everything so much. It doesn't tell you exactly what a compliance plan should look like, but it's very helpful to have this guideline in place. Next slide. So here I'm talking about the fundamentals of your compliance program. These are really the goals that you should strive for when building the program. So the first one is that it has to address the compliance and regulations issues that affect your organization. That's why it's important that your program is tailored to your organization specifically. It should have an ethical foundation. Ethics really is the core of a compliance program. If your management is not ethical, if your employees are not ethical, then your compliance program will fail. The program should also be able to support your company's growth, so it has to be able to scale from being small to being large. And you have to be able to service your customers, give your customer satisfaction, and I say here make money, but it's really, you have to be able to run your business. You have to have a compliance program that you can implement and that will be effective for your organization. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of what you can be doing and your framework for your program. So the first thing that you can do and that you should do is do a risk assessment. So you want to look at your contracts and your solicitations and figure out what you need. As we all know, there's a list of FAR clauses in your contracts and your solicitations. So this is a good outline to look and see what is it that I need to comply with. Next slide. Here are just some questions that you can ask yourself while you're doing your risk assessment. So number one, do you have the code of ethics and conduct? Does your management communicate effectively with employees? How often? This is important because it speaks to the role of your management. Management and ownership, they're really responsible for any kind of ethics violations that happen in the organization, whether they know about it or not. A lot of organizations have emails from management, newsletters that go out. It's important to have management bought into the program. Do you have policies and procedures in place that relate to organizational conflict of interest, equal employment opportunity? Confidential information is really important for a government contractor, as well as your contractor bid and proposal info, your source selection info. These are all biggies when it comes to government contracting, and you should have policies and procedures in place that relate to these things. Next slide. So after you do a risk assessment, then you can design and implement the program. So the first thing that you should do, and it has the most impact, is implement the Code of Ethics of Business Conduct. So this really sets your company standard for how it does business. It tells the world the type of organization that you are. It's the ethical moral compass of the business. This should be a formal document. You should distribute it to all your employees, and you should have them all acknowledge that they have reviewed it and read it. Next. This is just an illustration that shows, in the center here of these circles, I have beliefs, values, goals. This is really what I was talking about of the ethical core of your organization. So the ethical core affects the culture of your organization, and in that it affects all of the departments and really every facet of your business, including compliance. Next slide. The next thing that should be done is having a handbook or policies and procedures. And this is really separate from your code of ethics, the separate document. Here you can include your government contracting requirements, which are OCI, your source selection info policy, your policy on human trafficking, timekeeping, which is also very important for government contracting. And then you also want to have here policies and procedures on employment law and other state laws. So your affirmative action, your equal employment opportunity policy, policies and procedures about the Fair Labor Standards Act. So this is your overtime rules, and your leave laws like FMLA. Next slide. Your handbook should also be a formal document. It should also be distributed, and employees should also acknowledge this. The handbook should also always be updated. There are rules and regulations that change all the time, federal laws that change all the time. So it's a live document that should always be updated. And you should also every change that is done should also be acknowledged as well. It should be sent out to the employees so that they can read it and acknowledge that they have read it and understand it. Acknowledgement is important because if there's ever any kind of unethical conduct that's alleged, you can show that you have these things in place, you have a handbook, you have a code of ethics, you have distributed it, and your employees have read it and acknowledged it. So it's always good to keep a record of that. Next slide. The next step is to designate a compliance officer, or some large companies have actually compliance committees. And these are the people that are going to implement the program. They're going to handle the training, they're going to handle the distribution, and they really are a link between management and the program. So they're going to get the buy-in from management and have them on board with the policies. And they're also the contact person. So if there's any questions, if there's an unethical issue that comes up, they're the person that they can talk to. Next slide. Training and education is also a huge piece of the compliance program. Everyone should get training in an organization. It should not just be managers. So everyone should be trained from the top to the bottom. And what are some of the things that you can train on? Sexual harassment is a big one to train on. Mischarging, timekeeping, False Claims Act. You could train on the Procurement Integrity Act. These are just some examples. I mean, there's a whole list of things and trainings that can be done. As far as timing, upon hire is a good time to train people. There might be employees that you have that have not worked in your industry, so it's good to train them on timekeeping and charging of a government contractor, as an example. You should also train annually. You shouldn't just train once and then 5 years later do another training. You can rotate your trainings annually, but you should always keep them updated. And there's also targeted training, which happens after, unfortunately, there's an incident or there's some unethical behavior going on. You should also train your employees on that issue. Again, you should record who received the training and when they received it. Next slide. Reporting and communication is very important. You should have a mechanism for reporting violations. So you want to encourage this. You want your employees to call and report any kind of unethical behavior. It should be confidential and anonymous. Another good way to report or get communication on this issue is doing exit interviews. So when an employee separates from their company, you could have an HR person ask pointed questions on ethics, or just be on the lookout on hearing things about unethical behavior going on. Next slide. monitoring and auditing, you don't want to just have a paper program. So you don't want to just have a compliance program that checks the boxes and looks good on paper. You have to review it, you have to update it, reassess, and make sure that it includes everything that you need. Having an objective audit is helpful. So having a professional look over it and make sure that that you have what you need to have. Next slide. Collaboration is also important. You would need to get feedback and insight from the different departments in your organization. Everyone's going to have a different perspective, and each department head is in charge of their own department's ethics, so they might be able to bring to light something that you as a manager or as a compliance officer didn't know was an issue, and you can address that. Next slide. Here's some more design tips. Like I said, you want to formalize everything and really get acknowledgement. If there's ever a violation, you can show that you've done what you needed to do as an organization. Ultimately, again, management is responsible whether they know that something was going on or not. So documentation and really being able to show an inspector general what you've done is very important. Next slide. Again, really monitor. You don't want to have an outdated compliance plan, because having something old or that has a rule or a policy in there that's 5 years old and is already outdated, that could be worse than having no compliance program at all, because that shows that you really have a paper program. You have something that just looks good, but you're not really doing anything with it and you're not implementing it. You want to focus your compliance program on something that's effective. It's not important that it's you have a code of ethics that's 100 pages long. The most important thing is having something that's easy to implement and it's going to work for your organization. Also, encouraging ethical behavior is always important. You want to lead and show that culture of your company it's an ethical one. Next slide. You also want to make sure that you're disciplining non-ethical behavior. This is important only because it's showing that you are, as an organization, are taking things seriously. You want to apply that consistently and at all levels of the organization. Also, when something unethical happens or you have an incident, you need to check to see if there's any kind of mandatory disclosure obligation. And that's something that you can check on with your attorney and get some more legal advice on that. So that's all I have for my presentation. Mallory, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. And that was a lot of great information, and thank you for everybody who joined us. If you have any questions for Antonella, please contact her directly with the contact information you see on your screen. And at 12:30, we are covering how to qualify for our SBVO certification. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you, everybody.